Gods and Semi-Devils. Author, Jin Yong. Chapter 1, Part A. Chapter 1, Righteous Scholar traveled the perilous peak, adventures in the mountains. A flash of green, a dark green sword is thrusted out, pointing right at the left shoulder of a middle-aged man. The young man with the sword in his hand didn't wait for the move to grow old before suddenly tilting the sword sideways as the blade swipes towards the right shoulder of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man holds up his sword to parry. Zung. The two swords meet, each individual sword vibrates, creating a slight hum. The humming did not stop before the flashes began again. Another 3 moves have been exchanged. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's sword sliced straight down, heading towards the young man's forehead. The young man stepped to his right to dodge the blow while leading his opponent's sword on with his left hand, and then the green sword is thrusted toward the thighs of the middle-aged man. Both fighters are quick as a flash, fighting with all of their skills. On the east side of the atrium there sat 2 people. One is a Taoist nun of around 40 years of age, face as cold as iron, mouth closed shut. The other is an old man a bit over 50, stroking his beard with his right hand, face full of pride. They are seated about 2 meters apart, behind each stood about 20 or so male and female disciples. The west side is occupied by about 10 guests. Everyone's complete attention is on the 2 people fighting in the middle of the atrium. The fight has gone on for about 70 exchanges now, the moves keep on getting faster and tighter, but no winner has emerged yet. Suddenly the middle-aged man thrusted his sword out again with great force, too much force, and he started to teeter as if he was going to fall. A young man wearing green in the west of the atrium couldn't help but let out a little laugh. However, he immediately realized that it was very out of place and quickly covered his mouth with his hand. Right at this time, the young man in the atrium sends his left palm out, aiming for the back of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man took a step forward to avoid the strike. He swung his sword in a circle close to the ground and shouted, "Gotcha!" The young man's left leg was hit and his leg gave out. However, he pointed his sword at the ground and used it like a crutch as he balanced himself and seemed ready to continue. The middle-aged man has already sheathed his sword, saying with a smile, "Brother Chu, thanks for letting me win. Are you hurt bad?" The young man's face turned white as a sheet, biting his lips. He replied, "Thanks for pulling back, Brother Gong." The old man with the bearded face is alit with pride. He smiled and said, "The East faction has won 3 rounds, looks like the Sword Lake Palace, Zhenhu Gong, is going to belong to the East faction for another 5 years. Sister Singh, shall we continue with the match?" The middle-aged nun barely controlled her anger. Brother Zuo's disciples are worthy of his name. But has Brother Zuo made any progress on the no-measure Jade Cliff, Wu Liang Yubai? The bearded man shot her a look and said in a serious voice, "Has Martial Sister forgotten the rules of our sect?" The nun fed, but did not reply. The old man's surname is Zuo, first name Zimu, he is the head of the no-measure sword, Wu Liang Zhen, Sex East faction. The nun's surname is Sin, Taoist name is Shuang Qing, double clear, is the head of the West faction. No-measure sword sect used to be in factions of East, North, and West. The North faction in the last decades has weakened much, while the East and West has flourished. No-measure sword was started in the No-measure Mountains in southern China during the reign of the 5th Emperor of Tang. The head of the sect resides in the Sword Lake Palace. Ever since the faction started during the rule of the Emperor Renzong, benevolent ruler, of Sung, there has been a contest every 5 years during which the disciples of the 3 factions compete in the atrium of Sword Lake Palace. First faction to 3 wins is declared the winner and wins the rights to reside in the palace for 5 years. In the 5 years between contests, the losing faction study and trains hard in hopes of avenging the shame of losing last time. The winner, of course, does not slack off either. The North faction won 40 years ago but was immediately beaten in the next contest 5 years later. The head of the faction, in a fit of rage, moved disciples to the west side of the mountain range, never to compete again, as well as losing all contacts with the other 2 factions. In the 35 years since, both factions have won and lost, with the East winning 4 times while the West winning twice. That round between that middle-aged man named Gong and the young man named Tsu is the 4th round of this year's contest. The win by Gong is the 3rd for the East in 4 matches, thus making the 5th match unnecessary. The west side of the atrium sits guests from other sects, including invited witnesses that are invited by either faction. The rest are just guests who are here to watch a show. Everyone here has at least somewhat a name in the Yunnan area, with the lone exception being the young man wearing green sitting at the end, who just happened to be the one that let out that solitary laugh. The young man came with Ma Wuta. Ma Wuta is a big tea merchant in the area. He loves company and gets along with most everyone. If anyone in the world ever came to him for help, mostly financially, he would always do all he can without exception. Hence, he is well liked and well respected with many. However, his kung fu is only average. Zuo Zimu vaguely remembers the young man being introduced with the surname of Duan. Duan is the surname of the emperor in Delhi. Inside of Delhi borders there are tens of thousands of people with the surname of Duan. Therefore, when the young man was introduced, Zuo Zimu didn't really pay much attention to it, figuring that he probably is a disciple of Ma Wuta's. This Ma Wuta's kung fu is average to begin with, how good can his disciple be? So Zuo didn't even bother with the much admired phrase, just plainly cupped his fist and led them to the atrium. Who knew that this young man is so brazen as to laugh at one of Zuo Zimu's favorite disciples? So now, Zuo Zimu smiles and says, the 4 disciples of Sister Sin that fought this year all had very good sword skills. Particularly in that 4th match, our win was especially lucky. Disciple Chu's skill is at such a level at such a young age. Looks like his future is limitless. In 5 years' time, it seems like East and West are going to switch places. Ha ha ha. Suddenly he turns his eyes to the young man named Duan. My lacking disciple used a fake move, teetering step, to win earlier. This young gentleman does not seem to be impressed. Please demonstrate to my disciple how it should done. Mr. Ma is famous throughout the area, his disciple's kung fu should be very good as well. Ma Wuta blushed a little from that comment. This young man is not my disciple. With the little kung fu that I know, how can I possibly be somebody's master? Please don't think too much of it, Mr. Zuo. This young man came into my town, heard that I was coming to visit No Measure Mountain, so he asked to come along. He says that he has long heard of the scenic beauty of No Measure Mountain and wanted to see and experience it for himself. This got Zuo Zimu thinking, if he is your disciple, then out of respect to you, I wouldn't go too hard on him. But since he is just a normal guest and visitor, there is no need to be polite. Someone is actually brazen enough to laugh at No Measure Sword East faction's kung fu. If I do not make him regret it, then where do I put my face? So he sneers, don't know how we should address you, Mr. Duan, or which famous person is your master. The young man named Duan smiled a little. My given name is Yu and I have never learned any kung fu in my life. But if I saw someone fall, doesn't matter if he meant to or not, I couldn't help but to laugh a little. Zuo Zimu couldn't help but get angrier, for he does not have any respect in his tone of voice. What is so funny about it? Duan Yu lightly flicked the fan in his hand, casually replied, a person standing or sitting is not funny, lying in bed, no humor there at all either. Lying on the ground, on the other hand, he, is very funny. Unless he's a 3-year-old baby, then we'll make an exception. The more he talked, the less respectful he seemed to become. Zuo Zimu turns to Ma Wuta, Mr. Ma, is this Mr. Duan a friend of yours? In truth, Ma Wuta just met Duan Yu as well and doesn't know a thing about Duan Yu's background or past. However, he was born friendly and Duan Yu insisted upon coming to No Measure Mountain. Ma Wuta felt awkward to refuse, so he brought him along. At this time, he could tell that Zuo Zimu's voice is full of anger and won't hold back if he gets started. Duan Yu seems like a nice guy, no point in getting him into trouble. So he says, although Mr. Duan and I are casual acquaintances, we still came here together. To me, Mr. Duan seems very gentlemanly and does not know a single bit of kung fu. So his laugh a moment ago must have been just reactionary and he did not mean anything. How about this? I'm kind of hungry right now, so Mr. Zuo, why don't you get some wine and the two us then toast you 3 shots each as an apology. Such a good day today, Mr. Zuo, why fuss with someone of a younger generation? Zuo Zimu plainly replied, Mr. Duan, since you are not a friend of Mr. Ma, then if I, in any way, offend you it doesn't have anything to do Mr. Ma. Guangjia, this gentleman was just laughing at you, why don't you go and ask for some advice? Guangjia is the given name of that middle-aged man named Gong. He had been waiting for his master to say something. At once he unsheathed his sword, jumped into the middle of the atrium, flips his sword over, and offered the handle up to Duan Yu. Mr. Duan, please. Duanyu replies, very good, go on and practice, I'll watch. He did not move at all from his seat. Gong Guangjie's face turned purple. You. What did you say? Duanyu answers, you have a sword in your hand and is swinging it here and there. Want to practice? Then go ahead and practice. I never liked watching others fight and such, but since I wanted to come here and you aren't really fighting, then I guess it wouldn't hurt to watch. Gong Guangjie screamed at him, my master is telling you to come out here and fight it out with me. Duanyu lightly waved the fan in his hand and shook his head casually, your master is your master is not my master. Your master can command you, but your master can't command me. Your master told you to fight with someone, and you have done so already. Your master told you to fight with me. First of all, I don't know how. Second, I'm scared to lose. Third, I'm scared it would hurt. Fourth, I'm scared I might die, so no fighting. If I say we don't fight, then we don't fight. This whole speech, full of your master and my master, came out so smoothly that it seemed to be a poem. Numerous people in the atrium could not help but crack up somewhat upon hearing it. No Measure Sword West faction is divided half male and half female, and more than several female disciples start to laugh coquettishly. The serious atmosphere that so engulfed the atrium a moment ago is gone in a flash. Gong Guangjie walked up to Duanyu, points the sword at Duanyu's chest, asked loudly, you really don't know, or are you pretending? The sword is merely inches away from Duanyu's chest, only a small push is needed for the sword to penetrate his heart. But Duanyu's face is still calm and shows no signs of fear. Of course I don't know, why would I pretend? Gong Guangjie replies, how dare you cause trouble here in No Measure Mountain, here in Sword Lake Palace? My guess is that you are tired of living. Who is your master? Who told you to come here? If you don't tell me the truth, don't blame me if I don't hold back. Duanyu casually replies, hero, why are you being so ferocious? I have never liked fighting with others. Your sect is the No Measure Sword, in the middle of No Measure Mountain. It is said in Buddhist canon, there are 4 things that are of no measure: kindness, sadness, happiness, and sacrifice. As to what that means, I think everyone knows. Happiness leads to kindness, eliminating bitterness leads to sadness, being with friends and leaving bitterness leads to happiness, leaving everything so that worry and affection are equal as one leads to sacrifice. No measure is of Buddha, Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha. As he just sits there muttering to himself, Gong Guangjie has pulled back his sword. Suddenly, he threw his arm out and landed a solid slap on Duanyu's face. Duanyu tried to tilt his head to avoid the strike, but the slap was too quick. On his white gentlemanly-looking face, one can clearly see 5 red fingerprints. This caught everyone by surprise. Seeing Duanyu's casual attitude and all the playing around he does with his talking, everyone assumed that he must be someone with spectacular skills. Who knew he couldn't even dodge a very average slap from Gong Guangjie? Obviously, he does not know any kung fu. In this world, a master pretending to be stupid, jesting with others to amuse himself is very commonplace. How can someone that does not know kung fu be so brazen and foolish to do so? Even Gong Guangjie stood there dumbfounded for a moment, then immediately he grabbed Duanyu's chest and lifted him up. I was wondering what kind of extraordinary person you are. It turns out you are just a sack of shit. He threw Duanyu down. Duanyu rolled along the floor, finally coming to a stop when his head hit a leg of a table with a loud bang. Ma Wuda did not have the heart to see this, scrambled over and helped Duanyu up, all the while saying to Duanyu, so you really do not know any kung fu, then why cause trouble here? Duanyu answered while rubbing his forehead, I only came here to visit the mountains and to check out the landscape. Who knew they were going to fight? You chop me, I chop you, what's so great about that? A monkey show would be better. Goodbye, Mr. Ma. Goodbye, I'm getting out of here.